evinced, not only the desire to keep things quiet, but the paltry jealousy of the military people, because I am not a colonel, forsooth, or a captain in His Majesty's service. It would never do to trust me with a company of soldiers, and yet they would not send either colonel or captain, for fear of a stir in the rustic mind. The only thing that I can do with any chance of success is to rout out these vile Doone fellows, and burn their houses over their heads. Now what think you of that, John Ridd?" "Destroy the town of the Doones," I said, "and all the Doones inside it? Surely, Jeremy, you would never think of such a cruel act as that." "A cruel act, John! It would be a mercy for at least 3 counties. No doubt you folk who live so near are well accustomed to them, and would miss your liveliness in coming home after nightfall, and the joy of finding your sheep and cattle right, when you not expected it. But after a while you might get used to the dullness of being safe in your beds, and not losing your sisters and sweethearts. Surely, on the whole, it is as pleasant not to be robbed as to be robbed." "I think we should miss them very much," I answered after consideration, for the possibility of having no Doones had never yet occurred to me, and we all were so thoroughly used to them, and allowed for it in one year's reckoning. "I am sure we would miss them very sadly, and something worse would come of it." "Thou art the staunchest of all staunch Tories," cried Stickles, laughing, as he shook my hand. "Thou believest in the divine right of robbers, who are good enough to steal thy own fat sheep. I am a jolly Tory, John, but thou art 10 times jollier. Oh, the grief in thy face at the thought of being robbed no longer!" He laughed in a very unseemly manner, while I descried nothing to laugh about; for we always like to see our way, and a sudden change upsets us. And unless it were in the loss of the farm, or the death of the King, or of Betty Muxworthy, there was nothing that could so unsettle our minds as the loss of the Doones of Bagworthy. And beside all this, I was thinking, of course, and thinking more than all the rest, about the troubles that might ensue to my own beloved Lorna. If an attack of Glen Doone were made by savage soldiers, and rude trained bands, what might happen, or what might not, to my delicate innocent darling? Therefore, when Jeremy Stickles again placed the matter before me, commending my strength, and courage, and skill, to flatter me of the highest, and finished by saying that I would be worth at least 4 common men to him, I cut him short as follows: "Master Stickles, once for all, I will have naught to do with it. The reason why is no odds of thine, nor in any way disloyal. Only in thy plans remember that I will not strike a blow, neither give any counsel, neither guard any prisoners." "Not strike a blow!" cried Jeremy, "against thy father's murderers, John?" "Not a single blow, Jeremy, unless I knew the man who did it, and he gloried in his sin. It was a foul and dastardly deed, yet not done in cold blood; neither in cold blood will I take God's task of avenging it." "Very well, John," answered Master Stickles, "I know thine obstinacy. When thy mind is made up, to argue with thee is pelting a rock with peppercorns. But thou hast some other reason, lad, unless I am much mistaken, over and above thy merciful nature and Christian forgiveness. Anyhow, come and see it, John. There will be good sport, I reckon, especially when we thrust our claws into the nest of the ravens. Many a yeoman will find his daughter, and some of the Porlock lads their sweethearts. A nice young maiden now for thee, John, if indeed any." "No more of this," I answered very sternly. "It is no business of thine, Jeremy, and I will have no joking upon this matter." "Good, my lord, so be it. But one thing I tell thee in earnest. We will have thy old double–dealing uncle, Huckaback of Dulverton, and march him first to assault Doone Castle, surely as my name is Stickles. I hear that he hath often vowed to storm the valley himself, if only he could find a dozen musketeers to back him. Now we will give him chance to do it, and prove his loyalty to the King, which lies under some suspicion of late." With regard to this, I had nothing to say, for it seemed to me very reasonable that Uncle Reuben should have first chance of recovering his stolen goods, about which he had made such a sad to do, and promised himself such vengeance. I made bold, however, to ask Master Stickles at what time he intended to carry out this great and hazardous attempt. He answered that he had several things requiring first to be set in order, and that he must make an inland journey, even as far as Tiverton, and perhaps Credenton and Exeter, to collect his forces and ammunition for them. For he meant to have some of the yeomanry, as well as of the trained bands, so that if the Doones should sally forth, as perhaps they would, on horseback, cavalry might be there to meet them, and cut them off from returning. All this made me very uncomfortable, for many and many reasons, the chief and foremost being of course my anxiety about Lorna. If the attack succeeded, what was to become of her? Who would rescue her from the brutal soldiers? Even supposing that she escaped from the hands of her own people, during the danger and the ferocity. And in smaller ways, I was much put out. For instance, who would insure our corn ricks, sheep and cattle, and even our fat pigs, now coming on for bacon, against the spreading all over the country of unlicensed marauders? The Doones had their rights, and understood them, and took them according to prescription, even as the parson had, and the lords of manors, and the King himself, God save him. But how were these low soldiering fellows, half starved at home very likely, and only too glad of the fat of the land, and ready, according to our proverb, to burn the paper they fried in, who were they to come hectoring and harrowing over us, and hillogabassing with our pretty sisters to cook for them, and be chuckled under a chin perhaps afterwards? There is nothing England hates so much, according to my sense of it, as that fellows taken from prog tail, cot tail, pot houses, and parish stocks, should be hoisted and foisted upon us, after a few months' drilling, and their lines shaped into truckling, as defenders of the public weal, and heroes of the universe. In another way I was vexed, moreover, for after all we must consider the opinions of our neighbours, namely, that I knew quite well how everybody for 10 miles round, for my fame must have been at least that wide after all my wrestling, would lift up hands and cry out this black shame on John Ridd, if he lets them go without him.